Hello all, welcome to Paritranaya. In this class, we shall discuss about an important topic, that is parliamentary system. So, if you look at any country, there are different governments and different types of systems. So, the predominant systems are parliamentary system and presidential system. So, in this topic, we shall try to see the differences between the presidential system and parliamentary system and the features of parliamentary system and why we as Indians have adopted parliamentary system. So, which articles of the constitution specify that our system should be parliamentary type of system? So, very important point to note. So, here article number 74 and 75 of the constitution, they specify that we have a parliamentary form of government at the central level, article number 74 and 75. Similarly, article number 163 and 164 of the constitution specify that the type of government which exists at the state level is also parliamentary form of government. So here we understood that both at the center as well as at the states we have parliamentary form of government. Next, generally democratic governments, they are classified into parliamentary form of government or presidential form of government. If you look at any democratic government, either they are parliamentary form of government or presidential form of government. So what is the difference between parliamentary form of government and presidential form of government? So the major difference lies between the relationship between the executive and legislature. Executive and legislature. So when I say executive, what do we understand? Union executive consists of, we already discussed, that is President of India, Vice President of India, Prime Minister, Council of Ministers and Attorney General of India. Union executive consists of Prime Minister, President, Vice President, Prime Minister, Council of Ministers and Attorney General of India. Next, legislature consists of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha at the centers level. Similarly, the same applies to the states as well. So in the states we have governor, council of ministers, chief minister and advocate general of state. So here let us stick our discussion to central level itself. The same will apply to state as well. So generally when we refer to the term executive, we will not refer to President and Vice President or Attorney General of India. We will be referring to Council of Ministers headed by Prime Minister. So henceforth, whenever I will be using the word called as executive, so you should imagine Council of Ministers headed by Prime Minister. And also here legislature consists of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, but in order to make our discussions easier, whenever I say legislature, you should imagine only Lok Sabha. So whether the government is parliamentary form of government or presidential form of government, it depends upon the relationship between the legislature and executive. It depends between the relationship between Lok Sabha and Council of Ministers headed by Prime Minister. So this we shall understand at the fundamental level. In parliamentary system, executive is responsible to legislature. What does it mean? It means Council of Ministers headed by Prime Minister is responsible to Lok Sabha. In parliamentary system, who is responsible to Lok Sabha? Council of Ministers headed by Prime Minister is responsible to Lok Sabha. Whereas in presidential form of government, executive not responsible. So here executive consists of what? President, all those things. Here they are not responsible to Lok Sabha, where in case of presidential form of government. And also we need to remember that in case of parliamentary form of government, generally Prime Minister will be the most powerful candidate, whereas in presidential form of government, President will be the powerful candidate or powerful position. So here in presidential system, executive is not responsible to legislature, whereas in parliamentary system, executive is responsible to legislature. Let us assume this. Let us understand this at the superficial level. So what is that responsible? Executive responsible to legislature. It means we already seen Lok Sabha can remove Council of Ministers at any time. So here Lok Sabha cannot remove the executive in case of presidential form of government. So this is the fundamental difference. Next, parliamentary form of government, it's also called as cabinet government. It's also called as responsible government. It is also called as Westminster model of government, because this type of government is modeled on the British model, and the location of the British Parliament is called as Westminster. That's why we call it as Westminster model of government. Next, where do we find such kind of parliamentary government? So UPSC does not focus on each and every country, but there is a topic called as in mains that comparison of Indian constitutional schema with that of the others. So in that context, it is required. So we have this parliamentary system in Britain, Japan, Canada, and India. There may be slight differences between the systems which exist in these countries, but definitely there exists a parliamentary system. Okay, parliamentary system. Next, presidential government. So which we also call it as non-responsible government or fixed executive. Fixed executive means once the president has been elected, then he'll stay in his office for minimum period of 4 years or 5 years, whatever the fixed tenure is there. But in case of parliamentary system, where prime minister is the most powerful position, so his tenure is not fixed. He may be removed at any time. Okay, he may be removed at any time. So such government exists in USA, Brazil, Russia, Sri Lanka. Next, features of parliamentary government. So if you look at any parliamentary government, what are the features? Just let us have a glance into it. So any parliamentary government consists of a nominal executive and a real executive. So who is nominal executive in India? President is nominal executive. It means de jure, that is just for namesake. He does not enjoy the real power. So he is also called as head of state. Whereas prime minister, he is the real executive. All the real power lies with him. It is also called as de facto, and he is head of government. So very important thing to note: prime minister is called head of government. President is called head of state. So often UPSC poses a question and confuses us. So who is called as the head of state? We should not get confused. So president is head of state. Prime minister is head of government. Next, article number 74 already we have discussed. It says that council of ministers headed by prime minister should aid and advise president. So whenever president wants to take any kind of action, so he cannot take action on his own. So whatever the advice council of ministers has given to president, so accordingly he has to act. And whatever the advice that has been given by council of ministers to president, it is binding. It means president cannot say no. So this is one important feature of parliamentary government. Next, majority party rule. So this is also one of the important feature of parliamentary system of government. So what is majority party rule? So we already took an example, right? In Lok Sabha, among the 545 members, so BJP, we assumed 300. Next, Indian National Congress, we assumed 245. So what is majority? Majority is anyone who has got more than 273 seats. Why 273? Because 545 divided by 2 is 272.5. The whole number is 273. So minimum half of the seats who has secured, he will be called as a majority party, or that party will be called as majority party. So in our example, so BJP has got 300, which is more than 273, whereas INC has got 245, which is less than 273. So here BJP will become a majority party. Okay, majority party. So a person belonging to BJP will be appointed as prime minister by president. Next, so that person who has been appointed as prime minister, he will be also called as leader of majority party. He will be the leader of majority party. So presently Narendra Modi ji is our prime minister. So he is the leader of BJP party, and he has been elected as prime minister by president. Next, subsequently, ministers are appointed by president. We already know. So whether president has a choice? No. President has to appoint a person as a minister based on PM's advice. So whosoever PM has recommended, so all those persons have to be appointed as ministers. Next, collective responsibility. Okay. So ministers are collectively responsible to Parliament in general and Lok Sabha in particular. So you will get confused. So what is this Parliament in general and Lok Sabha in particular? So in order to avoid confusion, let us assume that ministers or council of ministers, they are collectively responsible to Lok Sabha. What does it mean? So when I say council of ministers, there are many ministers. Minister 1, Minister 2, Minister 3, and so on. Total 50 ministers. Okay, 50 ministers. If one of the ministers commit any kind of mistake, he commits a mistake. then the others cannot say that he has committed mistake. Minister 2 cannot say Minister 1 has committed the mistake, it is his mistake and not mine. Okay, here all of them are responsible for one particular minister's mistake. That is why it is called they swim together, and if at all they sink together. So collective responsibility. So if they are not working according to the expectations of Lok Sabha, then what Lok Sabha can do? Lok Sabha can remove the entire Council of Ministers by passing no confidence motion. Similarly, Lok Sabha can keep a control over the ministers by using various tools like questions during question hour, etc. So all those things we already discussed. Okay, So here what we understood is Council of Ministers is collectively responsible to Lok Sabha, and Lok Sabha exercise the control over the ministers through various tools like no confidence motion, question hour, etc. Next, Lok Sabha can remove Council of Ministers headed by Prime Minister by passing no confidence motion. So we have already seen about it. Next, one more important feature is political homogeneity. So we have seen that among the 300 BJP members of Lok Sabha, so around 50 will become ministers. So here we also know that Rajya Sabha member can also become minister, but just in order to make our discussions easier, I have just taken Lok Sabha as an example. So here among the 300 Lok Sabha MPs, 50 have become ministers, including Prime Minister. So all the 50 ministers, they belong to BJP. Okay, BJP. Suppose if no party has got a majority, for example, BJP has got 250, Congress has got 250, another JDS party has got 45 seats. In this case, what happens? No single party can form a government. So there will be a coalition government of two parties. Okay, because we require minimum 273 seats. In such scenario, what happens? All the ministers, they do not belong to same political party, so their ideologies will not be same, so they will be different. So chances of differences of opinion arising more are there in case of coalition government. But in case of government where a single party has got a majority, then differences are very less. Okay, so because ministers, they all belong to same party. So that is why under parliamentary system, political homogeneity will be maintained. So that is why policies can be very easily implemented. Okay. Whereas in coalition, it is very difficult because coalition is bound by consensus. So whatever the agreement that the parties have formed, based on that they have to work. Okay. So this is just an exception. Okay. Next, double membership. So again, this is a feature of parliamentary form of government. What is double membership? So we have seen that among these 300 people, these 50 will become ministers. So these 50, they are MPs of Lok Sabha, and also at the same time, they are ministers. It means a person can be a Lok Sabha member and also at the same time minister. So this is called as double membership. Okay, double membership. In presidential form of government, we will see that there will be no double membership. Either a person will be MP or a person will be minister. He cannot be both. Okay, so member of both legislature and executive. Okay, the same applies to the state level as well. Okay, a person will be MLA and also at the same time minister. Next, leadership of Prime Minister. So another important feature of parliamentary system is who will be the leader of Council of Ministers? Prime Minister. Who will be called as leader of Parliament? Prime Minister. Who will be called as leader of party in power? Again, Prime Minister. Okay, leadership of Prime Minister. Next, dissolution of lower house is an again important feature of parliamentary system. So what is lower house? Lower house is Lok Sabha. Which is upper house? Upper house, Rajya Sabha. So we have already seen that Lok Sabha can be dissolved, whereas Rajya Sabha cannot be dissolved. It's a permanent house. So dissolution of Lok Sabha, again it's a feature of parliamentary form of government. Next, who can dissolve Lok Sabha? We know that it is President. Whether President can dissolve Lok Sabha on his own? No. Based on the recommendation of Prime Minister, President can dissolve Lok Sabha. So what is dissolution of Lok Sabha? Dissolution of Lok Sabha is where all the members of Lok Sabha will lose their membership. Okay, will lose their membership. We already discussed about dissolution and all in a separate class. So if at all you are getting confused, you can just refer the videos pertaining to that class. Next, executive enjoys the right to dissolve legislature. Okay, so this is a feature of parliamentary system. The same what we have seen. So based on the recommendation of executive, President will dissolve the Lok Sabha. Next, another parliamentary feature is secrecy. So oath of secrecy is administered to ministers. Who will administer? President. Okay. We have seen that when a person becomes a minister, he has to take two different oaths, oaths of office and oaths of secrecy. So oath of secrecy is administered to ministers by whom? President. Again, it's an important parliamentary feature. Next, at the same time, let us look into the features of American presidential system of government. So here we'll only be discussing about the American presidential system. We'll not be discussing the presidential system which is prevalent in other countries. Okay, more or less it remains almost same for every presidential form of system. So in case of presidential form of system, president is both head of state. So who is head of state in India? President. And head of government. Who is head of government in India? Prime Minister. But in presidential form of government, both head of state is also president and head of government is also president. It means ceremonial position is enjoyed by president and real executive is also led by president. Whereas in case of India, ceremonial position is held by president and real executive power is held by prime minister. Okay, prime minister. Next, in case of presidential form of government, president is elected for a fixed tenure, of 4 years. Okay, based on electoral college. Electoral college means who all will participate in the election of the president. So no removal by Congress except impeachment. Okay, so presidents can be removed only on the grounds of impeachment. Okay, impeachment. Whereas in India, when we want to compare president of USA with India, we'll not compare with India's president, but we'll compare with India's prime minister. So India prime minister, he is not elected directly. Okay, he is the person who is the leader of the majority party. He can be removed anytime. He does not have a fixed tenure. So whenever Lok Sabha loses confidence in the prime minister, Lok Sabha can remove prime minister. So his position is not fixed. So here will not, very important point to remember, president of USA will not be compared with president of India, but compared with prime minister of India. Okay, prime minister of India. Next, in presidential form of government, cabinet consists of non-elected department secretaries. So it means those who are present in the Council of Ministers in USA will not call them as Council of Ministers, but we'll call them as secretaries. Okay, secretaries. And here in India, all the cabinet ministers, they are either member of Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. But here, whosoever is present here as a secretary does not have any relationship with Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha. It means a secretary is neither a member of Lok Sabha nor a member of Rajya Sabha in USA. Okay, in USA. So in USA, we do not have a house called as Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. We have different houses there, House of Senate and all. So here it is not important. Just we need to compare and just understand that their ministers, they are not members of either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, which is present in USA. Next, in cabinet form of government, so all the ministers are responsible to president and they can be removed by president. But in our Indian system, all the ministers, they are responsible to Lok Sabha, and also at the same time, prime minister is empowered to remove them. Prime minister is empowered to remove them. What prime minister will do? Prime minister will advise president to remove a particular minister. Okay, minister. Next, the same. President and his secretary is not responsible to Congress. So Congress is nothing but, in USA, to Parliament we refer it as Congress. Okay, to Parliament we refer it as Congress. So in India, Prime Minister and Council of Ministers are responsible to Parliament, but in USA, President and his secretaries are not responsible to Congress. Okay, so they need not work as per the expectations of the Congress. They can work according to their wish. Okay, their wish. No membership in the Congress. So who all is present in the person who is a secretary, he is not a member of Parliament. Okay, he is not a member of either Lok Sabha or Rajya Sabha, and he does not attend its sessions. So in India, our ministers attend the sessions of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, but in USA, the secretaries do not attend the sessions of what? Congress or its Parliament. Next, President cannot dissolve the House of Representatives, that is lower house. So in case of India, we have seen that President can dissolve Lok Sabha, whereas in case of USA, President cannot dissolve the House of Representatives. Okay, House of Representatives. Next, doctrine of separation of power is the basis. So three independent organs. So which are the three independent organs? One is legislature, executive, and judiciary. Okay. So in USA, there is perfect demarcation between legislature, executive, and judiciary. There will be no interference. But in India, there is no exact separation, because executive is dependent on legislature. As long as legislature is happy, executive will stay in office. Once the legislature is not satisfied with the work of executive, then legislature can remove the executive. That is, Lok Sabha can remove Council of Ministers. Okay. So here, doctrine of separation of power is not completely implemented in India. Okay. Next, merits of the parliamentary system. So what are the merits of parliamentary system? Harmony between legislature and executive. So Council of Ministers, here Lok Sabha. Why there is a harmony? Because executive part of the legislature. So all these ministers, they are members of Lok Sabha. Okay, and both are dependent on one another. Both are independent. Okay, executive part of legislature and both are okay. They are not independent. Sorry, they are dependent. That is why there is a harmony. There is a harmony between legislature and executive. Next, that is why there is a less scope for disputes and conflicts. Less scope for disputes and conflicts. Next, responsible government. So in case of parliamentary system, responsible government. So parliamentary exercises control over the ministers. How it exercises control? By asking questions during question hours, by using tools like no confidence motion, adjournment motion, etc. So in this way, ministers remain responsible to parliament in general and Lok Sabha in particular. So the tools used are question hour, discussions, adjournment motion, no confidence motion. Okay, these are just examples. Next, parliamentary system also prevents despotism. Means complete power does not lie with a single individual. But in case of presidential system, complete powers lies in president, and it may lead to despotism. But here in India, only prime minister cannot take all the decisions. He has to consult the council of ministers. So in one single person, power is not kept completely. So that's why any dictatorial tendencies that may arise are kept in check. Okay, are kept in check. So executive responsible to parliament can be removed by no confidence motion. So if executive is behaving according to its expectations and it is not listening to the legislature, then legislature or parliament can remove the executive. Okay, executive. Next, another important feature is ready alternative or merit of parliamentary system is ready alternative government. For example, one government is working, that is Council of Ministers. Lok Sabha is happy with them. But later on, if a government is not working properly, Lok Sabha is not happy. So what Lok Sabha will do? It will remove the government by passing no confidence motion. At that time, without going for election, okay. So the people who are present in the opposition, they can form government. They can form government. So without going for an election, readily alternative government can be formed. So that is an important feature of parliamentary system. So when ruling party loses majority, president can invite opposition party to form government. So this is possible in parliamentary system of government. So alternative government without election. Next, wide representation. So as all the decisions are taken by Council of Ministers consisting of around 50 ministers, roughly 50 ministers. So when we say 50, so among these 50 members, they may belong to different groups. Few may be women, they may belong to different religion, they may belong to different region and all. So in this way, in our cabinet, in our Council of Ministers, the different ministers, they may belong to different backgrounds. In this fashion, we get wide representation in the government. But in case of presidential form of government, there will be only one person. So the chances of getting wide representation will be very less in case of presidential form of government, but it will be more in case of prime minister or parliamentary form of government. Next, demerits of parliamentary system. So whenever there are some merits, then definitely there should be demerits as well. So one is unstable government. So why unstable government? Because we are not sure whether once the government comes to power, it will remain in power for completely 5 years. So because government stays in power as long as Lok Sabha is happy. So if Lok Sabha loses confidence in government, then the present government will be removed, it will outgo, and a new government will be formed. Okay. One set of Council of Ministers headed by Prime Minister will go out, and other set of Council of Ministers headed by Prime Minister will come. So now what happens? Whenever when this such kind of provision exists, then no guarantee of survival of a tenure. So means no government can be guaranteed to stay for 5 years. So that's why it leads to unstable governments. Next, no continuity of policies. Now the one government which goes out, the new government which comes in, so the new government which comes in may not be satisfied with the policies of the previous government, so it may not continue with the policies. So now this time it will have a negative impact. So one example could be investors. So the investors who are interested to invest in India, they will be interested to invest only when there is a stability in the policy. So if there is a frequent change in government, then investors will not be willing to invest in India, because a change of policy frequently might impact their prospectus, profit prospectus and all. So they may not be interested to invest. So no continuity of policies, so not conducive. It is not good for the country. So especially for the long-term policies, okay, long-term policies. So uncertain, because of the uncertainty of the tenure of government. Next, dictatorship of the cabinet. Okay, so even though power does not lie in an individual, but the cabinet may play the role of a dictatorship. Okay, so chances are there. Next, against separation of powers. So legislature and executive are inseparable, because the members of Lok Sabha itself will become ministers. So there is no perfect separation of powers. Rather, it's a fusion of powers. Next, government by amateurs. So what are amateurs? People with no experience. So in case of presidential form of government, so president appoints, especially in USA, president appoints the secretaries who have experience in a particular field. For example, a person who has experience in the health related field will be appointed as health minister. Okay, person who has experience related to defense will be appointed as defense minister or defense secretary. But here in India, so a person who is amateur, who does not have any idea regarding that field, also can be appointed as a minister. So that's why sometimes government, it is also called as government is being run by amateurs, that people who do not have experience in that field. So even this is one of the demerit. Okay, demerit. So whenever we have persons with experience related to that field, and if such people start administrating, then administrative efficiency will increase. But if no experience, then administrative efficiency will come down. Okay, will come down. So this is one of the demerit. If this is the reason, then why did we adopt parliamentary system in India? Okay. So we saw about the merits as well as demerits. Then why did we adopt parliamentary form of system? So one is familiarity with the system. So already the Britishers were ruling us, so they had parliamentary form of system. So we thought that rather than switching to a completely new, let us use the system which we are already familiar with. So this will be one of the reason. Next, preference to more responsibility. So when it comes to parliamentary form of government and presidential form of government, so parliamentary form of government is more responsible, whereas presidential form of government is more stable. Why more stable? Because once a person becomes a president, he will remain in office for 4 years in USA. Whereas here in India, we are not sure. So Council of Ministers may not stay completely for 5 years in that position. They may be removed at any time. But when it comes to responsibility, in case of USA, president is nowhere responsible to its Congress. President is nowhere responsible to Parliament. But in India, ministers are responsible to Lok Sabha. Okay, Lok Sabha. But what we preferred is, and we cannot have both stability and responsibility at the same time. So there will be a compromise between one of them. But in India, what we preferred responsibility than stability. Okay. In USA, there is more stability than responsibility. In UK, more responsibility and less stability. So what we preferred the UK model. That is, we gave preference to responsibility and not to stability. Okay. Not to stability. Next, need to avoid legislative executive conflict. So one more thing why we opted for parliamentary form of government is to avoid legislative executive conflict. Okay, the people sitting in a legislature and executive, if there are two different peoples or two different personalities, then chance of conflicts arising are more. But here, as executive is part of the legislature, because ministers are members of Lok Sabha, so chances of conflict arising are very less. And infant democracy. So India was just arising when it became independent, so it did not want to take risk. So in order to avoid the legislative executive conflict, it opted for parliamentary system of government. Next, nature of Indian society. So Indian society is very heterogeneous. Okay, consists of various races, languages, religion, etc. So in order to give greater responsibility and wide representation, they thought that parliamentary system of government would be the best model, which promotes national spirit and build united India. So all these factors, they prompted us to adopt parliamentary form of government. Parliamentary form of government. Next, just at the superficial level, distinction between Indian and British models. So even though India has adopted the British model, but still there exist few differences. So what are those differences? Just let us have a look into it. So parliamentary system in India. So largely based on British parliamentary system. So differences. India has a republican system, whereas British has monarchical system. So what is this? As a superficial we shall see. So in India, head of state, that is president, is elected. Whereas in case of Britain, head of state is not president but king or queen, and they are not elected, but this position is hereditary position. So very important point to note. Both, as India follows the model of British Parliament, but there is a fundamental difference. So India is republic, whereas Britain is monarch. So here in India, president is elected, whereas in Britain, king or queen, it's a hereditary position. Okay, hereditary position. Next, in Britain, it's based on doctrine of sovereignty of parliament. So what is doctrine of sovereignty of parliament? It means parliament is supreme. Parliament can make laws as per its wish. But in India, parliament is not supreme. Parliament is not supreme. So not supreme means it cannot make laws as per its wishes. There are certain restrictions. There are certain restrictions to Indian parliament. Okay. So what are those restrictions? It is restricted by written constitution and federal system. For example, now if center wants to make a law on a subject called as police, or center wants to make a law on a subject called as health, it cannot do it, because it can make laws only on the central list subjects. Similarly, state cannot make a law on subject called as defense. So clear cut it has been mentioned what laws can be made by the center, what laws can be made by the state. So all these, they restrict the powers of parliament. Similarly, judicial review. Now whenever you make any kind of law, so that law can be challenged in the court. So in court, what they will do, whatever the new law that you have made, whether it is adhering to the constitution or not. So that process of checking whether the new law is adhering to the constitution or not is called as judicial review. The judicial review. So Supreme Court and High Court have the power of judicial review. So what they will do, whenever a new law has been brought by either the central government or the state government, it will just check whether the new law is adhering to the constitution or not. So if it adheres, then it will uphold, otherwise it will reject it. So that power is enjoyed by both Supreme Court as well as High Court. So judicial review act as a what limitation or restriction on Indian Parliament. That is why Indian Parliament is not supreme. Similarly, fundamental rights, they act as a limitation on India's Parliament. So India's Parliament cannot make laws which restricts the fundamental rights of the citizens. So that is why these fundamental rights, they act as limitation on India's Parliament. Again, detail we will be discussing about these things when we start discussing about the topic called as fundamental right. Next, in Britain, PM should be of lower house. So in Britain, PM should be of Lok Sabha. But in India, there is no such case. So PM can be of any house. Either he can be of Lok Sabha or Raj Sabha. And in India, we have many such examples. So our present Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji is from Lok Sabha, and previous Prime Minister our Manmohan Singh ji were from Raj Sabha. Okay. So here there is no such restriction. They can be either from Lok Sabha or Raj Sabha. So in Britain, usually MPs are appointed as ministers. India, usually MP is appointed as a minister, but also person who is not a MP can also be appointed as a minister for a maximum period of 6 months. Okay, 6 months. So this is very important. Next, in Britain, there is a legal responsibility of the minister. Okay, so it means whenever president signs any bill or any policy, so a minister has to do a small sign. That is we call it as chota sign. But in India, no such system. Okay, no such system. So ministers not required to counter sign. So official acts of the head of the state. So whatever president does, ministers are not supposed to do counter signature. Next, in Britain, we have a concept of shadow cabinet. So in India, of opposition party, but in India, there is no such concept of shadow cabinet. Okay, shadow cabinet. So this was about the parliamentary form of government or parliamentary system. So important topic from the exam point of view. So every year or every alternative year, a question on parliamentary form of government appears in the prelims examination. Okay. Similarly, it also becomes important from mains point of view. So similarly, in the upcoming classes, we'll be discussing about all the important polity related topics. For all our further updates, subscribe to our channel and hit on the bell icon. Thank you.